we'll finally do what we set out to do last week, which was to finish the 10th chapter. Okay. Again, we're on the 10th chapter of Ecclesiastes of Kohelet, and we're now sitting at the last verse. Before I continue, let me just drop our link in the chat there. So in case you'd like to review anything or catch up on anything, please feel free to check out our website over there. Okay. We've been discussing this very long discussion. It's been a very long discussion regarding what's the point of everything anyway if accidents can happen at any moment. If safety is an unsurety, we're not sure about how safety works. What's the point of putting in all the preparation work? And the answer is a bit obvious, which is that of course you have to put in preparation. Of course you have to put in you have to do your part to make sure that you're safe. And you can't prepare for everything, but the wise person goes ahead and ensures that they've done the work that they can to try to be safe. I think what we could walk away with for sure is that there is he's defining this as a feature of wisdom. Okay, a feature of wisdom is preparation, concern, being careful. That is a feature of wisdom. It's not foolish. It's not a waste of time. It's wise. We're going to see, and the first thing that we're going to see tonight actually is that he's going to, I would say, temper it. He's going to temper that concept. He's going to say preparation is important, risk is important. The two are not exclusive of each other. Okay, and that's kind of what we're going to see tonight. So without any further ado, looks like I got you here, Myra. So without any further ado, we will start the look inside at the source. Okay, I can make this a little bit bigger. I think it's a very long verse. This first verse that we're doing. Having a hard time scrolling. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. All right, so again, this is the last verse in chapter 20. Last verse in chapter 10. I'm sorry, something just got on my nose right before we started. Okay, we are chapter 10, verse 20. All right. And he says like this. We actually saw the verse last week. We didn't get into any of the discussion, but so we'll begin it again from scratch. It says, Gam bimada acha, even in your thoughts, melech al tekalel, do not curse a king. Uvchadrei mishkavecha, and in your sleeping chambers, al tekalel ashir, do not curse the rich, wealthy person. Why? So there's a reason. It says ki of hashamayim yolich et hakol, because the bird of heaven will carry the voice, will move the voice with it. Uval kinafayim yagid davar, and the owner of the wings, in other words, another phrase for a bird, a more poetic way of saying a bird, yagid davar, will tell over the matter. Okay, let's read that one more time before we get into it. Gam b'mada acha melech al tekalel, also in your thoughts, do not curse the king. Uvchadrei mishkavecha al tekalel ashir, and in your sleeping chambers, do not curse the wealthy person. Ki of hashamayim yolich et hakol, because the bird of heaven will carry the voice. Uval kinafayim yaged davar, and the one with the wings, right? Again, the bird will also carry or tell over the matter. We have in our case over here one of our Kri Ketiv, as we refer to them. It's written with the letter Hey. In the actual scroll version of the Megillah, you would find that it has the letter Hey there. It does not how we read it. So when the reader reads it on the holiday of Sukkot, they do not read it with the letter Hey. What's the distinction? That's a good question. I have an answer for why it would be one way and why it's not that way. There's usually some hint that he's trying to tell us. I don't necessarily have one for this one. Okay. It's such a minute difference. Maybe as we go into it, we'll see that maybe there's a difference that we could consider. But we said last week that this is the source for the phrase, a little birdie told me, when something is secret, a bird of heaven will transfer the voice. There's a very interesting, before we get into the meaning of the verse, there's a very interesting story told over, a terrible story, honestly, told over by the sages. And they say over that there was the wicked king Hordus, or Herod. So he did a lot of things. He probably the thing that Herod is most famous for is that he rebuilt the temple, or he renovated the temple. So the final temple that was destroyed during this time of the year, during the days leading up to the 9th day of Av. So that final temple that was destroyed, the second temple in Jerusalem, was renovated a good 150 to 200 years before the destruction by King Herod. And there's a whole story about how Herod became king, and it's a long passage in the Talmud discussing this. But it says that at one point he went on a rampage and killed all the rabbis, which is not a good thing to do, I would say. And he left one man alive. He left one rabbi alive, a rabbi by the name of Bava ben Buta. Okay, Bava the son of Buta. Neither of those are very common names, by the way. It's kind of interesting. And for Bava ben Buta, he left him alive because he wanted to have one advisor from the rabbis, but he blinded him so that he wouldn't he wouldn't have that much power. Anyway, so he wanted to test his loyalty. He wanted to test Bava ben Buta's loyalty. So when he's blind, so he came over to him in private and said, changed his voice and said, "Isn't Herod such a rotten scumbag?" And Bava ben Buta said, "Even in your thoughts, don't curse the king." And he said, "He's no king. He's not even a king anyway. He was originally a slave of the Romans." And he said, "Well, even if he's not a king, he's a wealthy person. It says in your private chambers, don't curse the wealthy person." And Herod keeps on trying to get him to say anything bad about him, and he won't say it. And so Herod says, "Wow, if I knew that you rabbis were so loyal, I would have kept you all alive. Thanks." So again, obviously a terrible, terrible story. But he brings this verse to say, be very careful with your words. Be very careful with what you say. In fact, not only what you say, it's interesting, he says, even what you think. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king. And I thought that was very interesting, because if it's the bird of heaven is going to carry the voice, if it's the one with the wings is going to tell over the matter, so if you never verbalize it, then who's going to know? Even if a bird hears it, or as the sages say, if the walls have ears, even if the walls have ears, that's only if you say it. But even in your thoughts, you shouldn't say it. You shouldn't think it. So I thought that was an interesting idea, that he says, even in your thoughts, don't curse the king. So as we always have to do, we have to look at the distinction between these two lines, right? He doesn't just repeat it for no reason. He says, in your thoughts, don't curse a king. And in the chambers, in your sleeping chambers, don't curse the wealthy person. So it's interesting, he doesn't change the verb. Often he'll change the verb. He doesn't change the verb this time. Even poetically, you'd think he would change the verb. He doesn't change the verb at all. Exact same thing. Do not curse. Kalel is a curse. But he switches the subject. Object? I can never remember which one's which. Anyway, I think the subject. He changes the subject, and the subject is Melech and Ashir. In the first case, he has a king. In the second case, he has a wealthy person. And I think what you can see over here, that there's two forms of power that we are focusing on over here. Okay, there's one form of power that is an inherent power, a power that is self-motivated, and that's what I would call the Ashir, the wealthy person. Okay, the wealthy person has power in the fact that they own something, they have something in their possession, in this case money, that gives them power over other people. As opposed to a king. A king could be poor as dirt, technically, but they're a king because they carry social capital. So there's physical capital or monetary capital, then there's social capital. So the wealthy person is somebody who carries monetary or economic capital, whereas the king, the melech, is somebody who carries social capital, who has control of people because the people give him control. or give that person control. The sages, not here, but they say in other places, and it's kind of a truism, is that there's no such thing as a king without a nation. Okay, a king requires a nation to be king over. That's just how it works. And that sounds obvious at first, but then you kind of think about it a little bit and you realize, though, it means that the people give the power to the king to rule. And that was a major change when we moved over to the modern kind of American mentality, is that we no longer believed in, as a society, we no longer believed in inherent rulership. You're a ruler because, in the old ways, because God said you were a ruler, because you pulled the sword out of the stone, so to speak. That's the wise words of Thomas Jefferson when he says all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. What he's pointing at over there is that all people are equal in the fact that kings are no more powerful than subjects. So he's really disagreeing with the whole concept of kingship, which is very fitting in his letter to King George. Anyway, not to get on a history tangent. But anyway, that's the different forms over here. So when it comes to somebody who has an inherent, or in this case, an economic capital, that's their form of their power. So then you can really think about them whatever you want about them. And with them, you want to make sure that nothing gets spoken out. They have the ability to make things difficult for you. In that case, fine. You can think whatever you want about such a person, but because everybody might hate the wealthy person. And I think that's a pretty common feeling, actually. People hate wealthy people all the time, always have, probably always will, right? There's always a feeling of resentment towards wealthy people. So you wouldn't be so far off if you curse the wealthy person. People would agree with you. He says, good idea is don't do that, because word will get around. Okay, but in your mind, you can actually kind of keep it that way. You could keep you could curse him in your mind. When it comes to the king, when it comes to somebody who is got the social capital, that people around you and around them appreciate them and give them the rulership, well, then you have to be very careful. You want to go a step further and make sure that you don't actually go sitting and cursing them in your head, because now the culture surrounding you is not going to be in line with your thoughts. And when the culture surrounding you is not in line with your thoughts, then it's more likely for something to slip. Okay, people are going to just pick up on the fact that you don't like the guy. And so for that, you actually have to take another step, an extra step of protection. You want to take an extra step of protection to kind of make sure that you're not cursing the king in your thoughts. Now, that doesn't mean you have to love the king or love the government or whatever it is, but you do have to make sure that in your thoughts, you're not cursing them. I think that's why he's sticking with the verb, because it's a very strong verb, very strong connotation. You can dislike the king, you can dislike the mode of government and all sorts of things like that, but don't be cursing it, even in your thoughts, because then you're not in line with the people around you, and then it's much more likely for things to slip, right? And that's, I think, why there's two versions of the rumor getting around. There's a voice. That's in our second case. It's kind of matched wrong, I would say. You have these middle cases are connected. So cursing the wealthy person in your chambers is connected to the bird transferring the voice, because there's an actual voice over there. The second case of the winged one will tell over the matter. Well, there's no voice. Davar can be a voice, can be a word. It's true, but it also just means the matter. So there's no actual, and nothing, no one's saying anything, but nevertheless, it will come out. If you're thinking one way and it's not in line with the people around you, they will pick up on the fact that you dislike the guy, that you're cursing the king under your breath, or maybe even in your mind, and they'll pick up on that, and word will get around. The next thing you know, God forbid, somebody would have knocks on the door. We've heard that you're a dissident. We've heard that you're a traitor of some sort. So in that sense, you want to make sure that you're not cursing the king even in your thoughts. Okay, so two forms of capital. One is economic capital, one is social capital, and you have two forms of the idea getting out. One is in what you say, and one is actually in what you are thinking, and even that can get out and let people will know about it. I was looking to see maybe that would answer why the word haknafayim was changed to knafayim, but I still don't see a specific reason why that would be. Anyway, but so we'll shelf that question. So the first lesson he wants you to know is preparation, care, safety is important. And he starts with something that is essential to the wise person. When you have the wise person, the first thing that they have to know, the first place that they need to focus their care and safety is in the social realm, is around the people around them. They need to make sure, besides, we'll get into all the other forms of safety that a person that the wise person is going to be careful about. But he starts with the social, and he says, look, the governments around you, the wealthy people, power structures that surround you, those power structures, you want to make sure that you stay on the right side of them. I would say that that's up to a point. Obviously, we have a place for revolution. We have a place for, those are good Americanisms, right? We want to be able to speak up against our government when we feel that it's going in the wrong direction. So, I think that's also there. I would say this is in the general sense. Do I have a proof to that? No. I'm just trying to think. Yeah. I don't have anything like that, a proof to that, but I would say that this is just my interpretation, is that it's important to stay on the right side of power, until the time comes. I would say, oh, fine. How do I know that it's only in certain situations? Because we've had plenty of times earlier in the book where he said that the wise person speaks up to power, is not afraid of power. So obviously there's two different paradigms. Right? There's times when it's appropriate to stay on the right side of power. He's not talking about wicked people here. He's talking about kings and wealthy people. Nobody wicked. He didn't say Kisil or Sachal or any of our usual bad guys. So this is in a typical sense of a relatively just and fair government. I would say, or relatively safe systems of power. He would say better to stay on the right side of those safe states of power, as opposed to in other cases in the book where he's talked about the wise person taking a stance. That's when there's something wrong, when there's something rotten inside of it. Okay, we'll leave it at that. All right, so that is the end of chapter 10. That's the chapter 10, verse number 20, and that ends the chapter. Woo-hoo. Right? We've now finished chapter 10. But it's, again, perfect one of our examples of verses that if I was dividing up the book instead of Catholic monks, I would not have put a chapter break over here, because it feeds right into the next chapter. Okay, so let's just continue with chapter 11, verse number 1. And he says like this. This is, again, ways that it's appropriate for a person to be careful to apply rules of safety. Okay, and he's going to move it now from the social realm into actually an economic realm. Okay, into economics. I think this is a very interesting shift, and things that we kind of take for granted now, that there were plenty of times in history where they would never have thought of this, and that you may look at some of the coming verses and say, like, of course everyone knows that. Well, he's the guy who comes up with it. That's somebody had to be the originator, so he's the originator. Okay, so he says like this: Shalach lach mechal pnei hamayim. Send your bread on the surface of the water. Kivrov hayamim timtsaenu, and there, so that in the many days, in the length of days, you will find it. Okay, again, shalach lach machal pnei hamayim, send your bread, cast your bread on the surface of the water, kivrov hayamim timtzanu, so that in the many days you will find it. Okay, and this is a very important economic principle, which is you want, if you have money, if you have resources, don't hoard them. Don't keep them all to yourself. You want to invest them. You want to put them in places, you want to send them out and have them do something for you. Okay? Don't just hold your money, hide it under your mattress. Again, why is it in Kohelet? Well, because it's part of wisdom. It's part of what a wise person does is proper management of financial resources. That's part of wisdom. When I was preparing some of these verses, I was kind of wondering if that just kind of the end of the book, the rest of the book is really just good advice. And in a certain way it is. Jacob's asking, what is the translation of the last word? Timtsa'enu is you will find it. Okay, matzah being the shoresh, being the root word over there. Matzah means to be found. Timtsa'enu means you will find it or them. Yeah, sure. So I think there's actually, I appreciate you bring that up, you asking that, because there was something that stood out to me by the word timtsa'enu. You will find it. You will find it means that it's lost. That's usually what finding means. Finding means that something disappeared from your sight and now you find it. You could quibble with that, but the sages in halachic terminology are very careful when they use the word matzah, when the Torah, way back when in Leviticus, yeah, I think that's where it is, talks about finding lost objects. He specifically uses the word matzah to indicate that something was lost. Nobody knew where it was, and therefore you're allowed to keep it. Okay, so that's so matzah is a very specific indication. So in this case also, my understanding is that when you are going to invest your money, this is, as I mentioned before, he's hinting to a certain level of risk that you want to take. And that's send your bread on the surface of the water and in many days you will find it, means that you should be willing to take some of your bread and throw it somewhere, meaning some of your resources, and throw it somewhere where you don't know what's going to happen. And you should let kind of the forces of nature take care of that. In other words, you should be willing, at the same time that we're talking about being careful and safety, he also wants to let you know that there's a certain level of risk that you should take. You should let some of your bread get lost, and then you'll be able to find it at some point. The sages, not over here. The sages say a very interesting idea, which is that blessing, spiritual blessing, or actually physical blessing from a spiritual source, from God, only shows up on something that is uncovered, that is covered from the eye, right? That the eye does not see. In other words, the sages bring this up. They say that if you're checking your bank account, you should pray for more money before you check your bank account. Once you know how much money there is, no miracle is just going to pop money into your account. It's not how miracles work, right? So in that sense, better that there should be some aspects of your finances that you don't know about. I think this is a truth also, is that a person should perhaps put aside some of their investments in something that they don't know what's happening, and not focus on it, and kind of wait a while and see what happens, again, it's part of wisdom. Part of wisdom is removing a certain amount from your mind and saying that's doing what it does, and we'll find out later what happens. Again, taking a little risk, even when you're being safe. Okay, so it's this mix of risk and safety. Again, safety kind of being the central theme, and risk being an added feature, a necessary and added feature. The sages point out over here also on this verse, they say that this verse is a veiled reference to Jethro, to Yitro, when when Moses came to him, running away from Pharaoh. It says that he made sure he asked his daughters. His daughters were being bothered by some shepherds, and Moses goes and saves them. Whatever the story is very little information explained in the Torah itself. And then they come home, and came home early that day. And he asks them, why are you home so early? They say, well, this man came from Egypt and saved us and drew the water for us. So he said, invite him in, bring him in. They say, offer him some food, offer him some bread and water. And in that little action, Jethro set the stage for his own daughter marrying Moses, and Moses ending up becoming the leader of the Jewish people in that little action. They say also, look at Abraham, who invites in 3 stragglers on the hottest day of the year, and invites them in and offers them a little bread and water. And that sets the stage for them to bless him with a child. And that's the Jewish people, a long story short, very long story, very short, right? So they say over here, little actions, little positive mitzvah actions have long-term consequences and effects. So it's kind of a double lesson. There's a physical kind of raw, non-spiritual lesson of safety requires you put in a little risk and there's a reward in the long term. There's also there's also a spiritual message that you have to that little actions, little holy actions can have large outcomes. So that's kind of a double meaning of the verse. But I do believe that the simple meaning of the verse is going to be that you should be willing to apply a little bit of risk to your invest. First of all, invest, and second of all, apply a little bit of risk, at least some risk. Maybe don't. He doesn't say throw everything away. I'm sorry, he doesn't say throw everything away, but he does say you should be willing to do a little bit of risk. Okay, not that much more to say on this verse, so let's move on to the next verse. All right, and we'll stop here after verse number 2. And continuing with the financial thing, he says, "Ten chelek l'shiva," give a portion to 7, v'gam lishmona, and also to 8. Ki lo teda, because you do not know, ma yihyeh ra'a al haaretz, what will be the evilness, what will be bad on the land. Okay. Once again, ten chelek l'shiva, give portions to 7, v'gam lishmona, and even to 8. Ki lo teda, because you do not know, ma yihyeh ra'a al haaretz, what will be bad on the land, what bad will befall the land. Okay, and I think I think this is also a very well understood, currently, nowadays well understood financial concept, which is the concept of the diversification. Okay, you have money or you have resources. You want to divide them up into different areas. When we're talking about investments, when we're talking about taking a little bit of risk with your investments, don't put your eggs in one basket. I think we've heard that phrase before, right? So here too, it's a very simple concept. Give it out to 7 different places. Put your money, put your portions in 7 different places. Hide a little bit over here, buy a little gold, a little Bitcoin, a little, a little bit of everything. Don't say, "Oh, I got the gravy train to the future. I know exactly where I'm going to put all my stuff into one place." So put it in 7 different places. Not only that, when you think you got it all figured out, you've had it all divided up into 7 different places, be open to one more. Be open to one more possibility. Always consider that there's another thing where you can place this. Again, this is the physical, kind of the as we would say in our yeshiva, we would say this is the fleishic explanation, the very non-spiritual explanation of this verse over here. Make sure to be willing to diversify your investments, your resources. Now, forget Wall Street. Just think about if you have 1,000 gold coins in the old gold coins days, right? And so you're a wealthy person. Well, don't put them all under your mattress. hide a little bit in the forest, and have a neighbor carry a little bit of it, and invest in some real estate somewhere else. And you want to have your stuff kind of divided into different places for a very simple reason. You don't know what's going to happen, right? All those people who had all their money in Bitcoin just 2 years ago, Bitcoin was the biggest thing going, and it was just up, not going anywhere. And then with a couple mistakes here and there, and now it's nowhere near where it was. It's better than it was when it first started, but it's not what it was just a little bit ago. You don't know what's going to happen. So I hear ads on the radio all the time. The only thing that survived all the other financial crashes was gold. Put your money in gold. Well, no, put your money in a lot of things, right? In a lot of different places. That's the famous what's his name? That's Warren Buffett's whole thing. Warren Buffett's very, very well known in the financial world. This is his rule, his hard and fast rule of diversification. Again, so that's the as I said, the Fleischic understanding of the word of the verse over here. It's the very physical explanation. There's also would be a spiritual explanation that a person should also spread out their spiritual resources. There's a lot of ground that we need to cover in a spiritual life. Also, we want to make sure that we have our faith in the right way, and our trust in the right way, and our actions in the right way, and how we treat other people, and how we relate to ourselves. And there's a lot of different areas where we could focus our energies. Focus on all of them a little bit, even if it means it's going to be at the expense of one area. If you could focus on one area and you're going to perfect that one area, perhaps consider also picking up little pieces everywhere. Anyway, that's the basics of these two verses. Again, they're very interesting because they're really financial lessons, and you could learn spiritual lessons instead too, but the words mean what they mean. Invest, send your money out to places you don't know what's going to happen. Be willing to take a little bit of risk with your finances. Divide up, make sure you diversify your investments, and don't put your eggs all in one basket. These are very simple and human needs, and it's wisdom. Wisdom dictates these things. It's not against wisdom to have these lessons. We need these lessons too. I think that itself is a very good lesson to us, is that all these things, wisdom encompasses all parts of life: wealth, finances, social connections. It's going to affect everything. So in that sense, we want to make sure that we have it. He wants us to have lessons in everything. I think that's the basic idea. Okay, well, we're going to stop a little early tonight. We got a smaller crowd, and we got through what we need to get through. We got through the plan tonight. So thank God we are now firmly into the 11th chapter, and we're really closing in on the end of the book. So the 11th and 12th chapters, which are that's the end of the book, are not as long as some of the other chapters we've seen. So we'll keep on going for the time being. So, all right, thank you for joining us. Again, bye.